welcome back to
Bunso
Bites.
Bites.
I'm your host, Ami43.
And I'm your co-host, Chiggy.
And on today's episode, we wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive, I guess, or just kind of open the conversation on relationships. Specifically, our relationship. We have been dating for
It is now at least 6 years and 8 months.
Okay, so 6 going on 7 years. It's been a hot minute.
Mm-hmm.
And although we are not relationship experts by any means, we did want to discuss the things that have worked for us, the lessons that we've learned in the last 6 years. And yeah, so before we even get into that, Chiggy, I did want to ask you, because this was something that I came across on my feed, and I think a lot of people have had this thought, or they've wondered this, but what are your thoughts on finding like your one person, or like your person, I guess, finding the one? Do you even believe in that? And if you do, am I the one for you? Ooh, putting you on the spot. Ew. Don't do that.
Yes, I believe in finding the one.
Yeah.
Quote unquote the one, whether it is your soulmate or your best friend or whatever. However you want to, quote unquote, give that title to that person.
Define it, right?
Yeah. I believe in it.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I do believe you are the one.
I would hope so. We've put in a lot of miles.
Yes. But yeah, it just takes a lot of time and effort. Put that effort into it. Dedicate yourself and, just work at your relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that I noticed pretty early on with my relationship with Chiggy is that it was very obviously different from all my other relationships, which is very cheesy to say because everyone's like, oh, when you meet the one, you'll know that they're the one. But I mean, pretty much from the beginning of the relationship, he treated me with the type of respect and adoration and admiration that I dreamed about, but in previous relationships, maybe I didn't necessarily get to that level. And so I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool that this guy really likes me. And I felt like at the time, I was like, I haven't really done anything. That is not to say that our relationship is perfect by any means. We've, just like every other relationship, good or bad, or if it's with your, whoever your soulmate is or your one is, there's definitely a balancing act, a give and a take. I feel like in a lot of relationships, you have to be cognizant of being selfless in a lot of ways, because it's really, really easy to be selfish, right? It's really, really easy to, you're having a bad day. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to give time or energy to anyone because you're just not feeling it. But when you are in a relationship, I think some of the things that motivate me when I'm, maybe when I'm not necessarily feeling my best, is remembering that if I do things to take care of Chiggy, Chiggy takes care of me in return. But, and I would even say exponentially so. I think when we give to each other, we are giving the best versions of ourselves, and it allows us to keep our cups full. Because I don't feel, even though like, oh, okay, maybe I'm so drained that I don't necessarily want to cook dinner, but then I know that cooking dinner brings joy to Chiggy. So it's like, then of course I'm going to, be, even if I'm tired, even if I'm sad, or even if I had a really bad day at work, if I know that, all the more if I know that Chiggy had a bad day at work, I want to give him a nice home-cooked meal, because I know that, he, not only does he appreciate that, but it feeds in itself, literally and figuratively, because it's a meal.
Right.
But yeah.
And in turn, as Ami was saying, as she cooks for us, I pick up where she leaves off. So when she's cooking, I'm either setting the table, or I'm washing as she cooks. So at the end of her cooking, there's not just a stack of dishes just piled up in the sink or whatever. So I think that's what she's trying to say in picking up where she leaves off.
Yeah, I mean, but also it's just like, and there are so many times when Chiggy has done things on my behalf. He's taken care of things for me when, either I'm so busy or I'm so overwhelmed. Out of the two of us, I tend to be the one that's frazzled, and so Chiggy is so good about being a steadfast partner, so that even when I'm all over the place, he's kind of my rock in a lot of ways. And while you were saying that, it reminded me, there was this comedian who was doing this joke. In every good relationship, there's someone who cooks, but then the partner is the one that cleans the kitchen. Which I think is nice in a sense of like it conveys that thing of the togetherness of it. Mealtime is something that has been important to me since I was a child. Like, I grew up with having family dinner together, like sitting down with my family and eating every night together. And, Chiggy did not necessarily have that same experience growing up. So when we started dating, it was a big point of contentions, because I would tell him, I'm like, no, we can't just like go sit on like, we need to sit together and we need to be together and we need to eat together. And it was important to me. And I think because he saw how important it was to me, he himself prioritized it, so that now in our relationship, it's something that we do together. I think for the most part, we look forward to doing it together. Again, not every day. Sometimes we're just really, really tired and we just throw together whatever we can. But that doesn't make it any less special, I think, because what's more important to us is the togetherness of the quality time and the sharing a meal together, and literally the nurturing and nourishing of that experience. So I do appreciate you prioritizing that in a relationship, because it is important to me.
Yes, and that could have only been established through some type of communication between the two of us.
Yeah.
Coming from my family, we never really did a sit-down dinner, family-style dinner, and the five of us at a dinner table and eat together. I always remember just taking my food into my room, and then everyone else would be at their own little space except for my parents. They were the ones who actually ate at the table and just sat down and ate and just spent that quality time together.
Yeah.
So it was something that I had to get used to, but also something that we had to establish first before we even tried to do that.
Yeah.
And so this is going to bring me into my first talking point about communication.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout our relationship, Ami says that I'm terrible or horrible at communicating to her, because I like to bottle up my feelings and keep it inside and not tell her what's going on with me. Throughout these years, I've learned to open up a bit, but I'm not perfect, so I'm still working on it. But communication is a big factor, and it's something that all relationships need to establish.
Yeah.
So one thing that I do want to talk about is setting the boundaries. So like when you first get into your relationship, are you mutually exclusive with one another? So like when you first say, hey, do you want to date or something? You want to be boyfriend, girlfriend? Are you only going to date that one person throughout the entirety of that relationship, or are you free to date other people?
Right. Or like determining, I guess, in this day and age, because I feel like it's really easy to blur the lines of dating, like, oh, we're not dating, we're talking or whatever. So I think what Chiggy's getting at is, from the very beginning, I think it's important to protecting yourself and the other party, like your emotions, making sure that, okay, if we're talking, what exactly does that mean? And whatever it is that works within you, your relationship, in that point in your life. Chiggy and I, from the very beginning, I think, because when we re-met each other and we started dating, we were already older, and we were already, I don't even want to say the word mature, because we're not mature, but we were at a point in our lives where we didn't want to just talk, or we didn't want to just, like, we were very intentional about how we approached our relationship, which I think helped us be on the same page even from the beginning. And when it comes to, setting those boundaries, one thing that Chiggy and I have talked extensively about is understanding that when you're setting boundaries, particularly, and this is a lot more common when you're starting your relationship, but if there's instances of like something happening for the first time, and maybe like it hurts someone's feelings, not to say that someone's feelings hurt is not important, but if the other party didn't know, like let's say Chiggy made some kind of mistake or something and it hurt my feelings a lot, but he didn't know prior to this incident how much it would affect me or how much it would hurt my feelings, I should not hold it against Chiggy because he didn't know.
Right.
That being said, this doesn't take away from the fact that my feelings were hurt, or the fact that, you know, I think Chiggy and I both agree, like, you should still say sorry in that situation. But again, it shouldn't be like I fully blame Chiggy in that entire situation. He didn't know, and it's something that we worked on, both in our relationship, but even in other relationships. We identified how sometimes people would kind of jump the gun and be like, well, so-and-so did this and it hurt my feelings. Well, was that the first time he did he know that would hurt your feelings, or did he know that would, you know, make you feel some type of way? And if he didn't, then what right do you have to blame him if he didn't know it? You know, ignorance is bliss, I guess, but at the same time, it's like, again, not taking away from either party's perception of the situation, but it's the idea of like, you can't play the blame game until you've established boundaries. Now, in an instance of like, if I've established a boundary of Chiggy, I don't want this bag here because I keep tripping on this bag, and you know, whatever it may be, and I've told Chiggy that multiple times, and we've established that boundary multiple times, and he still does it, well, then that's just Chiggy not acknowledging or not communicating with me, or not acknowledging, you know, the boundaries that we've set together. So there's a difference, I think, a big difference, actually.
And so one of the examples I wanted to point out, and I do need to get your approval for this example.
Okay.
There was one fight that we had. I was dropping you home one night, and I don't know what the scenario was, but I was going to say a certain phrase that you don't want me to say ever again to you. Is it okay if I don't divulge this information?
Yeah, I think so. It's the like you told me I talk too much, was it? Or
okay. So,
or I'm being Maarte?
In this scenario, let me explain so you don't have to keep guessing.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
In Filipino culture, we like to use the term OA when someone overreacts or overacts.
Yeah.
And I said that to Ami the first time. This is the very first iteration I ever said this to Ami.
Right.
And, you know, I thought nothing of it, and she just got hella pissed at me.
And for context, OA in Filipino culture is a very common thing to say. Common as in like, it's not necessarily derogatory. I mean, it's just kind of like, it tends to be like an inside joke amongst family members or friends, like, oh, you're you're overacting, like Chiggy said. So him saying it, I want to clarify, him saying it was not out of character in any way, or him saying it was not anything that would have been like unjust in any way. Like it was totally fine for him to say that phrase. However, I did not take it very well.
Right. And so, like, I didn't see it in her face because we were walking to her apartment, and she just had a total change of mood. Her face changed. She was pouty. She was mad. And I didn't know what I had did wrong. And until she had told me about her past with that phrase, I was to never say it again. So I only bring it up when I'm talking to other people that are getting advice from us, and so this is why I needed your approval first to even say it. So that's what we mean when we state about making boundaries. So she's made that boundary with me. She set forth that expectation that I'm never to say it again, which I will never do. Unless we're talking about it in this context.
Right.
So that's just one thing I want to touch on. Anything?
Well, I was gonna. It's so funny because I get what that was not too long ago, but that wasn't in recent years. It had to have been a couple years back, right?
Oh, it was definitely when we were first starting to date, at least within the first year.
Yeah, and what's funny about it now, I guess, or the reason why I feel like I'm kind of laughing, hearing him say it and thinking about, I guess, as enough time has passed, thinking about when it actually happened, I was being OA, and I definitely was, and I definitely overacted in reaction to it. But and I mean, for context, this was just as a child, I had heard it all the time, to the point that it to me it was a phrase that I burdened myself as, like, people put me down because of that. I am a very emotional person. I'm a very emotive person. And people would always tell me that I'm OA because I am so emotional. And more often than not, it was in situations where, like, I couldn't even control the emotions. It was just, I was reacting in an emotional way. And obviously, as a child, you're developing how to control or communicate that properly. But yeah, when I heard him say it to me, I mean, it made me feel so small. And it made me feel so pitiful, and it made me feel bad because it reminded me of the times when other people in my life before, when I was younger, would call me that, would tell me that, and it made me feel bad. And that's not to say that that's what they meant. It was just that's just how I grew up. And so hearing it from Chiggy, it just, like, it made me feel like, oh, I am that way, and I'm not, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy enough, because it made me feel so small. Which is why I reacted as strongly as I did. And looking back on it, it's such a silly thing, but if anything, I appreciate the fact that despite it took a little bit of time, Chiggy did honor it. I mean, to the fact that I couldn't even recall what we were talking about before you started talking about it. He hasn't called me that. It hasn't come up at all in our relationship, and he's honored that because, and I assume because he respects and loves me, and he doesn't want me to feel that way ever again.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So, again, setting a boundary and setting the expectation, but in a way that you both are understanding of it, so that it doesn't become a future problem, or it doesn't become a future problem, or like a future argument, because it's the last thing you want.
Yeah. I just want to go back and touch on the setting the boundary part, because in my past relationship, when I had first asked this girl out to date, I thought we were mutually exclusive, but to her, she didn't think the same. And so later on down the relationship, while we were dating, she was fooling around with other guys, and that really hurt me because I thought we were mutually exclusive. But at the same time, we never set that boundary. So it's kind of both of our faults, because we didn't have that conversation, and we didn't have that understanding.
Right.
And so I think for all couples, that's something you should talk about, especially those starting a relationship, because you don't want to get hurt down the line, the same reason how I got hurt in my relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to also be open to it happening at any point in the relationship. As much as you and I have been dating for as long as we have, I'm sure that there are plenty of more things and instances and experiences that we have yet to experience, and we will experience them together, and hopefully in a positive way. But if something happens negatively, then again, it's the understanding that we take the time to communicate our boundaries and needs to each other, and then as a couple create that expectation of how we handle it, as our lives go on. New experiences are not exclusive to new relationships, although there are more new experiences in new relationships. But even for people who have been together for a long time, I think it's just important to know that the communication remains open. That's a big thing, I think, with us, for sure.
And so one more thing I also want to point out with our communication and setting boundaries, I think this is more prevalent in younger couples. We're not a younger couple. We're both in our 30s, so we have more understanding with one another. But I think that younger couples in their teens and their 20s, whenever you're starting a new relationship, both parties are coming in with baggage.
Oh, yeah.
And so holding that baggage against each other is not a good thing. So I know Ami has had way more relationships than I have. And I know that she's experienced a lot more than I have. But I don't hold that against her. As a matter of fact, I don't bring in any of her past relationships into this relationship, nor do I compare it to any of her past relationships.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good for new couples to talk about those things. So, like, I know we've talked about this with other couples. You know, say one party has just broken up with their ex or whatever, and they're still talking to that person, but it's not in a romantic type of way, you know.
Oh, like being friends with an ex.
Right. And so when you're in that new relationship, you know, you have to set that boundary with one another. Hey, can I still talk to my ex?
Yeah.
Or do you not want me to talk to my ex anymore because, you know, we used to date? And I think that's something that a lot of relationships fall prey to.
I think so too. Well, also, and it's just like the way you phrase it, where it's like having baggage. I wouldn't say that it doesn't affect us as an older couple, but maybe it doesn't affect us as much because we're a little bit more well-rounded in handling said baggage. But everyone has baggage. I want to make that very clear. Everyone has very, very unique baggage, and that doesn't make anyone any better or less than anyone else. One of the things that, as Chiggy said, you know, he had fewer relationships before he dated me, and I had more relationships before dating him. But we took that more as that was a difference between us, and so it was something that we had to be cognizant of when it came to our relationship. It was never something that, like he said, he never held it against me, or I never said that he was less than me because he didn't have as much experience, whatever it is. And on my experience, it's like so vanilla because, you know, what did I know? I knew nothing. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that you can hold space and grace for your partner's baggage and for their traumas and for whatever it is that they bring into the relationship, good and bad. But there also needs to be an understanding and an acknowledgement that there will be growth from it. So something that Chiggy and I had to work through from early on and every day and since is that I suffer from anxiety and depression, and it's a battle that we have to constantly battle. And I say we because Chiggy has to deal with me on an everyday basis. But it's also just one of those like quirks that I have. And I've worked on it. I've gone to, you know, I've done all the things that I need to do to get my mental health in a better state. But I still have bad days. And that's not to say that, again, it's the idea that, you know, I was very blunt about all of this from the very beginning. I told Chiggy from the very beginning, I was like, this is who I am. This is how I am. This is something that I have to deal with. I think in the last couple of years, we have worked on a system that works really well for us. It's not perfect by any means, but I've definitely grown and matured in a lot of ways that it's not as bad as it was before. That's not to say that it's gone, but again, it's like he held the space for me to have this fun little quirk, but it wasn't a reason for me not to improve on myself and work on myself in that in that aspect, because the last thing I would want, and I think Chiggy would agree, is that because of my mental health struggles, it would inhibit our relationship, or it would inhibit our goals, or it would inhibit where we wanted to be as a couple, or things that we wanted to do. Excuse me. And so it almost became important to me to continue working on myself in that way and learning better ways to handle it and different tools and things to manage it, so that it doesn't pop up as a problem for us. Again, I have good days and I have bad days, and on the bad days, Chiggy is my number one supporter and my number one, like, helper, healer, whatever it is. And I'll never discredit him from that. He's been the best. But I also know that because he is that on my bad days, on my good days, I strive even harder to be better, because he has to hold space for me, but I want to also give that back in that way.
Yeah, and it was really hard for me to learn about your struggles with mental health.
Yeah.
I've never had any struggles with mental health. I've never had like major depression or the anxiety attacks that you experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was such a learning experience for me from the beginning of the relationship until now, to learn like those types of episodes that you have and how to deal with it when you do have them.
Yeah.
So one example I like to point out there is, when we're out shopping or something and you're kind of like shivering to yourself, like shivering out of nowhere. And I know you're not shivering, but you're having anxiety attack. And so at those times where I see something off with you, that's where I need to step in and be like, hey, what's going on? It's just us two right now. What's the matter? And so, I try to give you that safe space that you can go through whatever you're going through, and then we'll take it from there. And so, yeah, it's been such a tough journey to learn and try to react to all different types of things that you're going through.
Yeah. Well, and I will say one of the, it's funny that you use the word, learning how to react. The best thing about Chiggy is that 9 times out of 10, he doesn't react. And as I've said before, he, in a lot of ways, can be a rock for me. Like, if I'm all over here and he just kind of grounds me, it's his non-reaction or his calm demeanor that really hones me in. Something that I know that a lot of people with different mental health things, I don't want to exclusively say one or the other, so we'll just say different mental health things, is that when we are around people that we don't know or that we don't trust as much, we fall into a pattern of putting on a mask in a lot of ways. And I cannot tell you how very, very insanely quickly my mask slipped when I was with Chiggy. I felt safe so early on in the relationship that I didn't feel like I had to mask the things that were happening to me. And a lot of my physical reactions with anxiety or with whatever it is that I'm going through, Chiggy has over the years been able to kind of quickly identify and just intervene in that moment without disrupting anything. He's so chill about it, which is really cool. Because I could tell you right now that some of my friends that I grew up with, they would have never known. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I'll tell people like, oh yeah, I do have, mental health struggles. And then people are like, you? Really? No, you seem so happy and so great. We wear a mask, people. I mean, you really don't know what's going on in someone's head until you've been there. And normally it's only with the people that you have the deepest foundation and trust with that you can really be the truest version of yourself. And that's not to say that I was ever trying to lie to friends and family before. It was just I was trying to hide because I didn't know how to handle it. And, with Chiggy, though, I know that if I need him to help me, he can help me. and he has helped me in a lot of ways. So I don't think that's an accident by any means, because of how, it's a blessing upon blessing, but just how safe and reassured I am in your presence, that I don't feel the need to be anything else. Did I phrase that correctly? I don't know. Yeah. So, all of that to say, one of the things that I also wanted to acknowledge is kind of an extension of what we were talking about earlier, but just having grace and space for the other person, and beyond what we just discussed with like my mental health or whatever. But there is a lot of give and take in a relationship, where you have to remember that is a whole other person, and you are a whole other person. And so the things that this person knows and this person has experienced is a lifetime before you were even in the picture, in more ways than one. So for Chiggy and I, we knew each other when we were younger, but then we re-met when we were older, and then we started dating when we were older. But Chiggy has an entire childhood and preteens and teenager years and early, 20, college years and 20s and all that stuff before I even came into the picture. And all of that to say that, again, it's kind of like that's his baggage, but knowing and understanding that if there are times when he's being really, really stubborn about something, or he's really, really holding tightly onto something, I need to be cognizant enough to know that I need to give him the space that he needs to do that. One of the things that he was saying earlier, which I don't think I've said that you're a terrible communicator. I think I've told you that we need to work on your communication, but it was very obvious early on that Chiggy is not one to communicate, and by communicate I mean verbally communicate. Chiggy will emote to me, and Chiggy will shut down, and Chiggy will do all these things that are nonverbal, and so I know that something is wrong. But it was, especially in the beginning, and even till now, it's something that we work on, but his lack of verbal communication in moments when he's not feeling okay, or something is wrong, or he's feeling overwhelmed or embarrassed or whatever it is. And he is so primed for so many years before I was even in the picture to non-verbally just shut down in a lot of ways. And so who am I to say, coming in when he's in his mid-30s, to be like, okay, well, now I need you to talk to me about every single thing, and which is what I did, yes, but there's the understanding of it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to even happen in 6 years. It's going to take our lifetimes for us to actively work on this together. And we've done everything from positive affirmations to giving each other space, to writing things down. We've tried multiple ways to get Chiggy to verbally communicate, and some things have worked, some things haven't. But I think what has happened in the last 6 years is that Chiggy feels safe, so that when he is ready to talk, he does talk.
Yes.
And that is miles and leagues and so far from when we started. Because when we started, you were literally mute sometimes.
When we're having arguments, and she knows this now, I may not always have something to say, and when I do have something to say, it may not always be formed correctly. And so what she likes to say to other people or to other couples, when we have our argument, she knows to give me my space so that I can process and think about how I want to phrase what I want to say to her correctly. And so what she says to couples is that it may take Chiggy 3 to 5 business days to process and react to what was just said or what we were arguing about. But when he is in that safe space to talk about it, he'll come back, he'll have a clear mind, and then he'll talk about it with me. It may not be clear or anything like that, but at least he'll give me something.
Yeah.
And that is something that Ami strives for in our relationship. When I break down and I have nothing to say or I don't want to say anything, I need to give her something so that she has that thing to hold on to
for the 3 to 5 business days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Going into whenever I need to go back to talk to her.
Right. And for me, it's again, I can run away with my thoughts very, very quickly and very, very easily, and I can assume the worst and everything is really, really bad and the world's going to blow up. But if Chiggy tells me, like, you know, he gives me something to hold on to, even though I know that, okay, he needs to process, there's also a part of me that's like, okay, well, he gave me this, so that this is what I'm going to hold on to. Because my mind, with my baggage from, you know, the years that I had before meeting Chiggy, you know, I want to assume the worst. I want to assume that the relationship's over. I want to think that everything bad is going to happen all right here, right now. When in reality, Chiggy just needs 3 to 5 business days to marinate. This reminded me of, sorry, don't laugh. In Frozen, the movie, the trolls talk about in their song, like, when people are feeling mad or sad or upset, they don't always say the things that they mean. And that is such a huge, I don't even want to say realization, but just it's something that Chiggy and I really strive to understand when we're in, like, the heat of the moment, because it's really, really easy. Chiggy and I can get really, really emotional, because, you know, I'm very emotional, and then he can be reactionary in my emotions, and so it's like a spark, you know, starts a spark, and when things get heated, as they can be sometimes, we know that the right thing to do is to step away, because neither of us want to be in a situation where we say something that, number one, is not what we mean, because, you know, we never want to, when we're cognizant and we're calm, we never want to say anything to hurt our significant other ever. Even when we are upset, we don't necessarily want to hurt them, but sometimes in our emotions, the way we say things or the way we express things can be perceived very, very differently, or it can be received, you know, incorrectly. And so we make the very conscious decision of, if things get really, really heated, like, okay, let's both cool off, or even if it's just one-sided. If I know Chiggy's really, really mad about something, you know, he'll tell me or I'll tell him, go cool off, and vice versa. You know, he'll tell me, he's like, you know, go out of the house, go drive, go do something. Because for me, a lot of times I need to distract myself, and for Chiggy, a lot of times he just needs quiet, or he needs 3 to 5 business days to bear.
Yeah, and I do want to point out 2 examples of arguments that we've had that, you know, it got to that point where we were screaming at the top of our lungs, or, you know, just at that point of breaking.
Yeah.
So there was one time where we were arguing in my room, and my parents were home, and it got to a point where I was so heated that I raised my voice at you, and, like, I was really yelling.
Yeah.
And so my parents were downstairs. They heard it, of course. They came upstairs, checked on me, and my dad knocked on the door, and, you know, he asked if we were okay. And I screamed at him because I was so heated.
Yeah.
And, you know, after that argument, you know, I had to make that realization that, hey, you know, when you're at that point, you need to just stop, walk away, do something to calm yourself down and cool down.
Yeah.
So this brings me to my second example, where we were arguing again, and you were saying something that I knew that I was trying to get my point across to you.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the right words to say. But when I said it to you, you reiterated the same thing that I was mad at. And that put me over the top again. And so at that point, I wanted to yell, but I didn't. you could see that I was physically frustrated and just, filled with emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I thought back to my first example, and I didn't want to yell, and so I told her, hey, I'm gonna need my space. I need some time. I gave her a kiss, and then I told her, I need you to go for now.
Yeah.
And so, you agreed. You left the house, and then I went to the kitchen. I punched the refrigerator because
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because I was filled with emotion. I heard you verbally scream outside, and yeah, and in that moment, even though we weren't there next to each other, we knew our frustrations were getting the best of us.
Yeah, anger robs you of cognizant and presence, because it consumes you more than you can be present in the moment and realize I'm saying or doing something that is hurtful, or I'm saying or doing, like, I'm reacting in a way that's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And we've we've had to get to those points to even realize that was something that was important to us. And by important, I mean it was important for me and it was important for him individually, that when we are like that, we're not trying, or we're not in a place where we're going to hurt the other person.
Correct.
And that's not to say that we've ever said horrible things to each other. No, but again, in the heat of the moment, or when you have that anger consuming you, you really can't think. Like, you just can't, because you're just feeling, and that's all you can do, which is fine. Everyone has the right to be angry. Everyone has the right to feel the feelings. I'm the queen of feeling feelings. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't think that makes it, I think if anything, it makes us better, because if we could identify the moments that we're like, okay, well, we can't handle or talk about this right now. Okay. Oh, but that means we're going to talk about it later.
Correct.
And there's always the expectation, boundaries, setting that boundary. There's always the expectation that whenever something comes up, and honestly, 9 times out of 10, at least between Chiggy and I, in the more recent years especially, we're not even angry at each other. We were just angry about something else. Mm-hmm. And then because we're together all the time, something happened that sparked, something else. And then that made him irritated or me irritated. And we're just like, whoop, okay, hold on. Let's not talk about it now. With the understanding that the end of that sentence is, but we'll talk about it later. Right. We'll address it later. We'll handle it later. We'll face it together later. I don't like leaving things hanging, because anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I think that you do a good job in respecting that, knowing that, because I can't leave things hanging, but also it's important for you too, because I don't think you like to leave things hanging either, or like you want to be able to know that it's been resolved. It makes you feel better, I think. When you leave it hanging, you're just like, well, then what? Or it doesn't feel good. I don't think, anyways.
And now that we've talked about our feels, I want to bring us to our last talking point about perspective. Uh-huh. As you know, guys' perspective and girls' perspective vary a lot.
Yeah, it can be vastly different.
It is very, very different. And so it is at those points when, in your arguments, you need to look at the perspective of the other person. Mm. And so I have a couple examples that we can share about perspective in one of our arguments.
Yeah.
And so there was a time where we were making something together, and in that something we had to put other objects in there, and I had more objects than Ami did, but we had to make it even with the amount of objects that we need to put in there. And so Ami had one way of thinking how to put those objects into that, and I had a different way. But none of us, or neither of us, communicated the way we wanted to put those objects in there.
Not specifically.
Correct. Not specifically. And
we just agreed, okay, one object needs to go in this bag. And it was like, okay. And then we just agreed without actually agreeing on how we were going to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I had gotten pissed off because we were going towards the same goal. It's just when I started to put my items into the bag, you had stopped me abruptly and you had said, wait,
what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
But it was so abrupt and so at a higher pitch. Like you were blaming me for something I did wrong. And so my perspective of it was that I was doing it wrong and you were either mad or angry to me about how I did it. But when I had explained it to you after the fact of how I wanted it to be done, you even agreed with me that it was the right way to do it.
Or the more correct way.
Yes.
So because we didn't agree on how we were distributing these objects, we just said, okay, one in every bag. Okay, cool. Break. And then we just started going. And he was doing something, or he was doing it differently from how I was doing it. And I was like, wait, what are you doing? And I said it like that. So in my head, I was like, I stopped myself abruptly. I was stopping Chiggy abruptly. Again, just the perspective of the situation. I'm not saying that what Chiggy saw or believed of the situation was incorrect, but just completely different perspectives, because I was like, wait, what are we doing? What happened? Because I thought we agreed one in every bag, and then he was like, no, one set in every bag, I guess. I don't even remember the specifics. But it was funny it's funny after the fact, because as Chiggy said, when he finally explained himself and we actually communicated I was like, oh yeah, that's like way better than what I was thinking. And I openly admitted it. And I was like, I straight up told him, I was like, why didn't you just say that from the beginning? Like, we could have 100% done that and we would have been done sooner. And it was a more efficient and effective way of handling it. He just didn't say it. Love the nonverbal. But it was again just a situation of what I had said or how I had acted. In my eyes, I was like, oh wait, what are we doing? Versus him, he thought I was like, what are we doing? Like, what are you doing? And I was blaming him, which was not at all what I was intending, or that was not my intention at all. And so what I had said was not what Chiggy had received. And that's kind of a big thing that I would actually say this is something that we've been more cognizant of recently. Mm-hmm. I think it's maybe something we've thought about before, but in our recent disagreements, or whatever they are, we've been very hyperfixated on, well, what was your perspective on it and what was my perspective on it, and where are they different and why were they different? Because if he feels like I said something that hurt him, then it's my job to apologize, because I would never intentionally try to hurt Chiggy, and vice versa. One of the things that I feel like we try to be when we're discussing how situations happen, and we're kind of like recalling it or discussing about it after, as we were saying earlier, we talk about it later, which is fine because sometimes we can't talk about it in the moment. But I think we really have been trying to hone in on what we say versus what is heard, because it can be the same words, but it can be two very different messages. And I think our growth in the way, not only the way we listen to each other, but the way that we listen to what you what you heard. I don't know if I feel like I'm getting lost in the English language, but it's like, if I pay attention to how Chiggy received what I had told him. And this has happened a lot, not even in arguments, but just kind of in everyday life. Sometimes he'll let me know, like, hey, the way you said that made me feel like you don't think I know what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh goodness, no, that's not at all what it was. I was focused on doing the 10 other things on my to-do list, and I just kind of blurted it out to you because I needed to get it out of my head into your head so I could focus on this. And then he's like, oh, that's Ami being Ami. And then that was me recognizing, well, when I tell Chiggy something, I need to be more present about it. And we very much, and it morphs our actual everyday communication with each other. I think there are times when we concede both to each other. Like, you concede to me when I'm frazzled and I'm overwhelmed and I'm overly busy, but then I also concede to you in recognizing the way that you need to be properly communicated to, so that you can receive the message but also receive it in a way that is respectful and like proper to you.
And so I want to bring an example of this thing that you're talking about, of what we say versus what we hear. For the launch of our channel, Punso Bites, there is a very specific example that I want to bring up to you guys. Ami was trying to relay to me that she wanted to release 3 episodes at launch. And I don't know if it's my hearing or the way that I received that message, but the way I had interpreted her saying that is that I had 3 episodes ready, but they were released 1 week after each other. But the way Ami wanted it was that she wanted 3 episodes released at the day of launch.
3 episodes live at launch.
Yes. And so I guess the way that it was said and the way that it was heard were different. I can understand now if it was said in a more concise way, that it could be perceived more correctly. But I can see both perspectives.
Yeah.
And, for me, I am a math major, so everything does need to make sense.
Yeah.
So the way you say things or the way it is ordered in your sentence does matter for me. So, yeah. Do you have anything else that you would like to add for this, what you say versus what we hear?
Well, I guess I wanted to tag on at the very end of that story. When I realized that Chiggy uploaded the 3 episodes, but he uploaded them to be like consecutive versus live at launch, my first instinct was anger, but also just betrayed. We had conversations about this. Granted, I think, as Chiggy said, there was not just a miscommunication, but just a misunderstanding. And, social media is something that I have worked in and studied, and I was very adamant about how I wanted everything to be done and set up. And so when I saw what he had done, I was so frustrated, and like I said, I felt betrayed, because I was like, does he really not acknowledge that this is I know what I don't want to say I know what I'm doing, because that's not really, I'm not trying to be like I'm some social media expert, but I do have some insight. And just having him blatantly ignore this, this thing that I know and I studied, it was like, how could you do that? Because that happened on an afternoon, I think. I don't know, maybe I wasn't working, I don't remember. But I was waiting for Chiggy to come home, and when he came home, and I in the moment, so like I said, I was betrayed, I was hurt, I was upset, but I also knew that I wasn't really going to see Chiggy for a couple more hours, and I knew that I was like, this is important enough that I need to talk to him about this soon, like now. other than it being like a time thing because we were about to launch and all that stuff. So fast forward to when Chiggy comes home, and I had to make the decision of I could approach Chiggy and approach him with all the betrayal and hurt and anger that I had in my soul. Because I was like, how could you do this to me? Like, you're just completely ignoring everything that I'm trying to set up for us because I want to give us the best chance and this, that, and the other. And, but I made the decision of, well, instead of doing that, why don't I ask what he thought I said, or I don't even remember what it was. I was like, instead of approaching him with this feeling, let me approach him with a question for clarification. Because what I didn't want to happen was to blame Chiggy for something that he may not have even done wrong, which ultimately, again, as he said, it was the way he understood it. And so it was like, oh, no, I actually meant it like this. And as soon as I said I meant it like this, he was like, oh, okay, well, we could change it. And at that point, I had already changed it. I'm not going to lie. But it was as simple as that. And then the better part about this was after we had that clarification of, oh, I said this. Oh, I thought you meant this. Oh, okay. Then I could come to him and pour onto him, oh, when I saw that, I felt really, really hurt, and I was scared that we were going to have a misunderstanding, and I didn't want it to turn into a fight or anything like that. And Chiggy then showed me compassion and love, and he was like, no, that's not at all what it was. So what that ultimately led to, or like what that ultimately gave me, was not only the resolution to the problem or the misunderstanding, but not only did we avoid having a fight of any kind, we ended up having a moment of deep understanding and appreciation for each other. And it was like all because, and I'm not trying to credit myself. I'm really, really not. It was just, I knew I made the very conscious decision of when I talk to him about this, I'm not going to come to him upset. I'm going to come to him and just ask a question. That was the thing in my head. I was like, just ask the question. Just ask the question. Because at least if you ask the question, he'll have some kind of answer, and then you just go from there.
Yeah. When she had said we should have 3 videos ready at launch, and that in that statement that you said, I don't know if I quoted it word for word correctly, but if the statement was we need 3 videos ready at launch, there is no stipulation of when those videos had to be released. And and so I had 3 videos ready at launch. They were just released a week after each other, but you specifically wanted 3 videos ready to be watched at launch.
Live at launch.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's the small detail that was missed, but as you can see, we have 2 different perspectives of it.
Of the situation, right? And again, it comes down to I have to put my trust in Chiggy, and Chiggy has to put his trust in me. I have to trust him enough to know that he wasn't trying to go against what I was saying. He wasn't trying to fight me. He wasn't trying to disagree with me. And even if we did disagree with each other, I know, maybe not necessarily feel in a moment, but I know that it's not his intention to do so in a way that would hurt me. And the same goes for him. If ever, there are many things that Chiggy and I can disagree about, but we do it in a respectful way to each other, because it is much more important that we take care of each other versus, fighting or disagreeing or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think that covers all of our main points. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we conclude the episode?
No, other than I'm sorry for all the fights that we've had, and thank you for understanding my insights and giving me the space I need to handle the situations that we've gone through. So, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry too, but I also say that with I have so much compassion in my heart for you, because I feel like because of a lot of those like big crazy fights, we grew a lot out of that too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
It both individually and as a couple. And I mean, that's not to say that I wish anyone to be fighting. That's never what you want. You would like it that you could just have honest and open conversation. But sometimes it takes going through those kinds of hardships to, I don't know, I feel like it helped us mature in our relationship in a positive way. So, yeah, don't fight each other. Fight the problem. Yeah, don't fight each other, but fight the problem. And if you guys, if you guys have the same goal or you guys have the same aim, I don't think it's really not hard to get back on the same page. You just have to be willing to give space, but also give a little sometimes. Because, you know, someone may need space, but someone may need a little too. And I think that concludes our episode. If you guys have any thoughts or additional comments you'd like to let us know, comment down below. Have you guys had either similar fights to what we've talked about or any similar issues? Or if not, anything unique, let us know down below, and we'll catch y'all in the next episode. Bye!
Bye.